Spirit of God, open our hearts to your word spoken for us. And in hearing you, the veil will be lifted and we will be free. Amen. So tomorrow, November the 11th, we mark in the Lutheran calendar Soren Kierkegaard. The Lutheran calendar remembers not only saints, but people of great intellect who contributed to the Christian tradition. So Soren Kierkegaard was a 19th century philosopher and theologian. And one thing that I read that he said, which I think is very applicable to today's gospel, is this: life can only be understood by looking backwards. It has to be lived forwards. I think that's really what the readings, both from Job and from Luke, are talking about today. Look at God's ending. Look for God's ending. God's completion of your story. See, God moves in front of us. And what happens at times in our life when we're in difficult time, we get stuck looking behind us. Looking at the past, looking at things that used to be regrets we have, things we could have done or should have done, and we get stuck looking behind us when God is in front of us, calling us forward to new things. And we have to keep our eyes focused that way, focused in hope. See, God has an end to our story. God has an end to this chapter you may be going through in your life that is good and beautiful and incredible. But to live it, to live God's finale for us, we have to follow. We have to stay focused with our eyes on God. The whole story of Job is a story of a man who kept his eyes on God. For those of you who don't know the background of Job, Job in the Old Testament is a story about a man who was righteous and who was very, very successful. Job had 7 children. Thousands and thousands of sheep and oxen and cattle in his herds. He was blessed. He was righteous. Praised God. Was focused on God. So one day God and the devil, as the story goes, are having a conversation. As God is boasting about Job. Look, Satan, look at how wonderful my servant Job is. He blesses me. He's faithful. The devil says to God, well, yeah, of course he's faithful. Look at all you've given him. Look at all he has. He has an easy life. I tell you what, God, take away everything he has, and you won't be so faithful. He'll curse you. So God says to the devil, okay, take away everything he has, but don't harm him, and we'll see. So Job loses everything. He loses his flocks, his herds, even his children. He gets boils on his skin, and still he remains faithful to God, but he's trying to figure out what is going on here. And in the book of Job, 3 of his friends come to him to try and help him understand. And they say, well, listen, Job, you must have done something wrong. Look at what's happened. You must have some sin that you forgot about in your past that you're paying for. Job says, no, I didn't. I'm innocent. I've done nothing wrong. And in these long speeches back and forth, trying to figure out what's going on, this is where Job ends. It's in today's reading. Arguably, the words that Job speaks today are the most famous in the whole book. After all of his trying to figure it out, why is this happening, he says this: I know that God lives. And when it's all over, God will stand on the earth. And before I die, I will see God. God will be at my side. I will see God and no other. What Job is saying is that when all the upside downness of this world and all its problems are over, God is there. And that in God's ending, in God's completion of the story, everything will be as it should be. But it's up to us if we want God's ending to follow. And this convoluted, bizarre, strange scenario is presented to Jesus in the gospel. 7 brothers marry one wife. Whose wife is it? Sadducees make up this elaborate, twisting story to trip Jesus up. But Jesus gives the simplest answer, one they wouldn't have ever dreamed of. So So what he says is focusing on whose wife it is about looking at the back. It's about looking at what was, trying to figure out a problem. What he is saying is look forward, not behind. God has it figured out. He knows the road and the answer even when it seems confusing to you. So his answer to the Sadducees is look at what will be. Look forward at the life that will be, that can be if you follow. God is a God of the living, Jesus says. God is a God of hope, of the future, not the past, what is to come and what will be. What he's telling the Sadducees is that for all the twists and turns in our life, God's answer is very simple. We all find ourselves in valleys in all sorts of different ways and times and for different reasons. Sometimes we see the valley coming from a mile away. We know it's inevitable, but we resist it until we can't resist it anymore. We know that we have to go down into the valley in order to get to the other side. But we put it off as long as we can. Sometimes we're in the valley in a split second. Our head spins and we say, how did this happen? How did I get here? But you're there. And the only way out is forward. We end up in the valley when unhealthy relationships begin. And sometimes even when they end. And beautiful ones that are suddenly over or changed. When you don't know if you can make the bills for the month and you feel like a failure. By the way, you're not. When your life is going in a direction you didn't plan and you don't want. When you see our country in a place that frightens or disgusts or confuses you. The message of Job and the gospel is keep your eyes on life. Keep them forward. Keep them on hope. I think when we're in our life and we're going through it and we find ourselves in these valleys, these places that feel heavy and dying, dark and cloudy as ink, I picture God with pen in hand when we're struggling, saying to us, wait. Just wait. The story isn't done yet. I have more to write. There's more to say. There's an ending to this chapter that you don't know about yet. I know. You just have to write it. Just wait. I promise you there's more. But we have to look. We have to expect it. Job looked forward to where God was pointing. He struggles, yes, and he questions and he doubts. He's confused and he's angry at God, but he looks always with hope. Jesus tells the Sadducees, life is up there ahead. Don't worry about death. Life is up there ahead waiting for you. God's ending. God's final word on the story, and everything will be as it should be. And I can tell you that for my own life, and all the twists and turns and unexpected directions my life has taken, and I have shared some of those with you throughout the years, God has never, not ever once dropped me. Never led me to the wrong place. It took a while, maybe longer than I would have wanted. There were definitely some valleys. But God never put me anywhere that in hindsight, grace and wisdom couldn't be found. But I can tell you also that I did a whole lot of unnecessary worrying and what-ifing. And when, God? When? Wasted a lot of time on it. But God's hand was in all of it. As Jesus says in the last line of the gospel, to God, all of them are alive. God sees life. God sees the ending. God sees your ending. God is waiting as you struggle and worry and stress with pen in hand, saying, wait, there's more. Trust Him. God sees what God wants to write for you. But you have to follow. You have to listen to where you're being called. And God will make a way where you don't see a way. In the end, when all the worrying and what ifs fall away, God is there, writing, finishing the story. And with the ending, with God's final word on the story, everything will be as it should be. Spirit of God, we pray that by your grace, our hearts will be good soil for the seed of your word. Amen.